like the three of us, if you have an awakening, a Kundalini awakening, or even spiritual awakening within a urban environment or a non-monastic environment, the system that you have an awakening in is going to deeply affect your journey. And I guess what I want to kind of segue into is the external, is that it's almost as if, and I can speak from my own experience here, is I had to reconfigure my system, my external system. I had to reconfigure my energetic relationships with people, my business, the way that where I lived, my relationship with my family, because the Kundalini was teaching me that every single relationship I had to be, wasn't necessarily in alignment with my true self. But it wasn't teaching me this in words or in a language. It was teaching me this through me feeling suddenly this is not working for me. This particular situation is not working for me. But when I realized it's not working for me, I experienced terror, because the idea of something so logically good for me is now not good for me, and I have to get rid of it, just caused a lot of fear in me. And I think without a framework around you to support you, you're just going to experience fear, completely, fear. And you're going to also perhaps think you're crazy, or think there's something wrong with you, because society is not allowing you to shift and change. It's trying to keep you in that position. So I think, we have an internal journey with Kundalini. We actually begin to have to change our external system as well, just to have a journey that we can be okay with.
You mean societal systems, like our structures?
Yes. Starting with our family, starting with our work, moving to a more authentic place. If we're going to stay in like I live in London, for example, the question is, how do you sustain yourself and have a Kundalini awakening in a big city? And I think lots of people have been asking this question. So family relationships, work, money, all the things that you normally think about, Kundalini is now saying, actually, what you thought was good isn't great, and what you thought was working for you isn't working for you. And it becomes quite, this is what I think Kundalini is about, facing your fears, because essentially, if you have any fears of losing anything, it will make you face that, because that's a block. Effectively, your fear is a block in your energetic system. And if its journey is to burn through the blocks, you will eventually have to face every one of those fears that are blocking your system. So actually, I guess what I'm saying is that you cannot have an internal journey without having an external journey simultaneously. And in some ways, the two have to go hand in. There has to be a relationship between your internal journey and the external journey, where if you're going to change what's inside, you're going to somehow change what's outside, because you have to make actions. And I think that's what's interesting about the journey for me now, looking at it becomes action orientated, where you change your system, you change your personal system. And potentially, if many of us do the same thing, then there's a collective change happening.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And we need, it's like what you would, through that process, based on what you were talking about, that transitionary period where it's really going off, where your subconscious is merging to your conscious. We just need some time to process that, time away, time out of our normal routines. Like we were discussing earlier, how can society support that? We were talking briefly earlier about universal basic income. I mean, that's something that obviously it's huge. It's a huge topic in and of itself, but just to touch on it, like we need a system that can allow us space and time to process. Like I know as a result of COVID, so many people who were fortunate to get to be financially supported during COVID when they didn't have their jobs, they were exploring their hobbies, their passions, reevaluating their life, redirecting their life. That was a breathing space to be able to do that. And that's so important when you're going through. I mean, not many people have the opportunity to be able to have that space to do that, but just that time to reconfigure what you're doing with your life is so important. So important. If only we could create something in society that allows people for that time and space, instead of ploughing through with the 9 to 5 until retirement to pay the mortgage off.
Interesting to work. I think it's interesting thinking about the word time. in two aspects, really. One in the sense that when we talk about Kundalinis, it's not like a one-off explosion, one-off experience. I think we probably all agree it's very much more of a process that, and it's, everyone experiences differently in the sense that, for me, the initial few months was ridiculously difficult and intense, but then it became a much easier journey. But so these changes are actually can take a whole, all these stages of in a way struggling and in a way disengaging from social norms can take actually can take a long period of time. It's not something that's going to happen in a few weeks or few months.
So that's so true. It is a lifelong process. It's definitely a lifelong process as you evolve, as you change. And there's it's really hard to make those skillful life choices as well, the wise choices that get, because we're working through sort of mental structures, imprints that have been there from such an early age about belief systems, deep belief systems about, your sense of self-worth. Do you deserve happiness? How much do you believe that? Of course, everyone deserves happiness, but some people don't actually believe that and won't go and seek a harmonious situation for themselves. Whilst the Kundalini experience is going, they'll stay in toxic relationships, stay in horrendous jobs, stay in environments which are unhealthy for them. This is everyone. This is everyone. The problem with the Kundalini experience is that it's heightened. The suffering's more intense. So that's kind of, you get deeper and darker quicker, and therefore leave that situation maybe quicker because it's unbearable. But I just, it does take a lifetime to figure some of that stuff out. Those conditionings so deep in us.
I now remember the other point about time. In our society, again, it goes down to conditioning, but also the economic system of crazy more and more economic growth. Is that human beings have become human doings? In a way, we've lost the ability just to be, and it's something I definitely find. I imagine it's pretty well universal with Kundalini. Is actually, you find yourself really enjoying or needing to have that time just to be, which doesn't mean you can't be active as well, but you actually need that time just to be. Do you think that?
Yeah.
You relate to that?
Really. I think there's something happening, isn't there? There's something evolving which needs a bit of space, sensitivity. There's something about, they talk about this in the development of a child as well. When if a child is born into a really stressful environment, where there's maybe a lot of violence or maybe a lot of arguing or a lot of being uprooted all the time, there's neurons that are being formed that are able to soak up stress hormones. And in a stressful environment, those receptors don't really develop or form fully. So that child grows into a state where they're constantly being flooded with the stress hormone, where they're constantly stressed out. They don't have a healthy ability to adapt to stressful situations as a result of being born into a kind of crazy or chaotic situation. And so that space and time that we need, that just to be, allows that chemistry to settle, I think, allows time for those old traumas to fade into the background a little bit, so we can start to act and behave rather from fear center, but more from creativity or love or joy, the more positive emotions, rather than reacting all the time, which seems to be, unless we get our space, we can't do that. We can't recalibrate.
But I think the important point to note here then, for people who are watching this who might be new to the phenomenon and going through it themselves, is that without giving yourself space and time to go through the process, it's going to be more difficult, because if you fight it, or if you stick with the attachments that it's burning through, it's going to cause you either physical or psychological issues.
Mm.
And the space and time that might seem difficult to obtain, but if you actually give yourself that space and time, you will actually have a much more, I'd not say smoother experience, but let's say less challenging physical and psychological experience. Those heightened senses that we mentioned earlier on, that nervous system issues, if you're not careful, it might shut down. Or we spoke earlier about someone we know who couldn't work on a computer for a year, or people who have no energy left because they are, let's say, they keep on going down that road and the Kundalini is saying no, stop, and they keep pushing and suddenly the body just shuts down. So it's important to listen to the process, even though it might seem illogical or counterintuitive, and to give yourself that space, even if it means stopping, not working for a while or not having as much of an income. Because on some level, and I've found this myself, the Kundalini doesn't put you in a place where you have to lose everything, but it does challenge you. It challenges you to understand what is more valuable. Like Alan, going to what you're saying, I think for me, Kundalini said your most valuable commodity is your time. Your time is the most important thing, and if you give your time to a job, you might be getting paid something for it, but that's not time to yourself. And it's actually asking you to reevaluate the value of your own personal time and give it to yourself, which does seem counterintuitive if you're a working person.
Yeah, it's a shame that we don't have those systems set up in society for us. Like in India, they do. You can go to an ashram. That's okay. There's people donate to ashrams like that. That's the social norm to go have some time out, learn yoga, practice yoga. I mean, I suppose not so much if you've got a family, but certainly in older age, that's what people do when their children leave home. They go to an ashram. That's a kind of in a Brahmanical system. That's what they would do. But I mean, those systems are there. The idea of spiritual evolution is so deeply entrenched into the system, the social systems, the culture. And so it's just straight off from the bat, everybody has a sense of normalization of spiritual evolution and growth in the human being. We are still untangling ourselves, I suppose, from the church. We don't have a sense of spirituality being an unreligious thing. I suppose that's definitely emerging now, and the New Age certainly had a lot to do with it. But if we could see the Kundalini experience or the spiritual experience, the evolution of a human is not a religious one or a cultural one or a social one, however it does affect all of those realms, we need to somehow re-establish that meaning of what spiritual evolution is in our society, so that we can normalize it. So it's a normal thing that everyone just understands. Oh, they're just having a little time out for their spiritual evolutionary process. That when that's a normal thing in society, then it will be a smoother ride.